Hello, I'm Les Davis and welcome to the Mendip Hills. This is the second in a series of videos made by the Mendip Society, and this time we're going to be talking about the development of the Mendip Hills. We're going to be talking about the history. How was it created? Because it just didn't happen. To try and put things into perspective, what I've done is I've made a timeline here along this dry stone wall. Now each metre along this dry stone wall is going to represent 10 million years, and our story starts back 416 million years ago. Well, this is the start of the story, the Devonian period. It's around about 416 million years ago, where Mendip as it is today, in fact Great Britain, was somewhere south of the equator. Everything was still moving around, nothing had bolted itself down yet. So we are looking at a coastal plain, probably rather pleasant, a shallow sea, a warm shallow sea, and a high range of mountains to the north of this coast, where the masses and masses of rock and soil were being washed off during the winter period through the rains, and they were being put out across this plain. And this settled down into the Devonian red sandstone that we know so well today, that's right at the top of Blackdown. Now we need to move on a little bit. We're going to go 416 million years. Let's move forward. Let's come here to the Carboniferous period of around about 350 million years ago. Now the Carboniferous period was a time of great life. There was so much oxygen within the atmosphere that things were a lot bigger. Massive dragonflies and huge fern trees that were growing here. And it's all coming down. Let's start with the limestone, the stuff that Mendip's made of, this stuff. And if you crack, if you crack it open, you get that horrible stinky smell at the bottom of the pond. You know, that horrible stuff that might be in the bottom of your washing machine even. And this is hydrocarbon. Hydrocarbon gets turned into this. This is where all our petrol comes from. And what has happened is that millions of tiny sea creatures have been crushed down into the mud at the bottom to create the limestone, but also some of them were squished up so much they liquefied and turned into oil. And now that's why they call it a fossil fuel. Let's move on to the next stage of about 300 million years ago. Now I said earlier on that things weren't moving around much. Now they are. The tectonic plates, all that stuff underneath the surface of the earth, starts moving around, and suddenly what we know as Africa starts to collide with Europe, and it starts to heave up into the air. And what we have then is the Permian Period. This is all the mountain building that's going on, and Mendip is now being created as a mountain for the first time. It's rearing up out of the landscape, and as it does so, it cracks. And so you end up with all those Devonian red layers being right at the top of it. Erosion takes place, and that's why we have the geology of Mendip. Going to move on now. It's going to get a little bit hotter. This is the Triassic period of Earth's evolution. This is the hot, dry desert, a barren, treeless place. That during the winter, in the violent winter storms, there would be huge floods coming down off of this mountain range. Burrington Combe has been born. Burrington Combe is a wadi, a dried up riverbed that is about 200 million years old, and it would take all of that water runoff from the mountain and spread it out across the plains below. It's quite incredible to think that Burrington Combe is so much older than Cheddar Gorge, but Cheddar Gorge is far more impressive. Let's move on a little bit further. Yes, Jurassic. So when I ask school children what about Jurassic, it's always, well, T-Rex and all the monsters that they've seen on the film. Well, the early dinosaurs were starting to appear in the Triassic period, and during the Jurassic period what has happened is all the sea levels come right up, and it's drowned Mendip. It's stuck it underneath water, and it becomes what they call an archipelago, which is just a series of little islands sticking out of the ocean. And during this Jurassic period, that's when the early dinosaurs really start to get to grips with things. You see, climate change is nothing new. I won't say that we haven't accelerated, but it was happening mega time back then. Moving on, because now we're all underwater. There's not going to be a lot really for us, but I want to stop on the timeline to look at this, the Cretaceous Period. This is around about 65, 66 million years ago, and during that time, that was when you had, yeah, T-Rex. Him and the rest of the dinosaurs ruled the earth. But things are about to change. And what we end up with is around about this period of time, we have an asteroid that comes tumbling in from outer space. And this asteroid hits the earth with a big bang. And it wipes out 65% of life on earth. The only things that are going to stay are stuff that's living in the bottom of the ocean, and maybe stuff that's able to burrow underground. Blots out the sun, wipes out the food source, like a massive thermonuclear explosion. And so that's the end of the dinosaurs and the beginning of the mammals. So let's move on a little bit more towards the modern day. Brought you up towards the end of this story now. This is the Quaternary Period. That's the period that we are in at the moment. Mendip has only come out of the water probably about 6 million years ago, which is nothing when we've been talking about these times and distances here. So during this period we get a series of ice ages, and I say it was a series of ice ages, and the last one ended what, like 10,000 years ago, which was the birth of Cheddar Gorge. But what we are looking at is that this is nothing compared to the distance that we've been looking at. And I said at the beginning, you know, my timeline, here we are, 1 meter, 10 million years. And this story is going back 416 million years. And so what's our part in it? We've been around that long, if not just a little bit less. So that just goes to show how much we've altered this landscape. Well, that's the end of our second video in the series about the Mendip Hills. Hope you've enjoyed it. And what we're going to do next is we're going to go and have a look at some of those special places within the Mendip Hills where all this starts to come to life.
If you'd like to find out more, go to www.themendipsociety.org.uk or search for us on Facebook.